I want to introduce our guest speaker today, a truly extraordinary American. As Dean of the Wharton School, I bless myself on a daily basis for the amazing people that I get to interact with. In a world of amazing people, there are few like David Rubenstein. David is the co-founder of the Carlyle Group, one of the largest and most successful investment firms in the world. I think probably most of you knew that. But there's so much more to David. He's an extraordinary philanthropist. He was one of the original founding signatories of the Giving Pledge, a group of American billionaires who committed to donate more than half of their total wealth during their lives. Recipients of David's support include numerous universities and think tanks, national institutions, and monuments in Washington, D.C. Some of the amazing things that David has contributed to philanthropically include loaning to the United States government a copy of the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, the US Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, and the first ever map of the United States. David is also an extraordinary civic leader. He is literally chairman of many of the most important not-for-profit institutions in the world, including his and my alma mater, Duke University, the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, the Counselor on Foreign Relations in New York, and he's the former chair of the Tsinghua University Business School Board, where I've had the fortune to serve under him. In addition to all of that, David is a media star. He's got an eponymous TV show, The David Rubenstein Show, which features peer-to-peer conversations that's on Bloomberg TV and PBS. And last but not least, and I have to say this is a bit humbling for those of us on the stage who do not join him in this august institution, David is also an academic member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. We're so fortunate to have David with us today. Can you please join me in welcoming him?
Thank you, Dean, for those kind, overly generous words. And when my eulogy needs to be given, I now know who to call. And I want to congratulate you on having the best Australian Philadelphia accent I've ever seen. And former Dean Tom Robertson, where's Tom? Tom is there. Tom, thank you very much for everything you did for Wharton as well, when you served for 7 years as Dean as well. Despite the introduction you just heard, you may have been wondering why I am asked to be the speaker today. I don't have an executive MBA. I don't have an MBA. I don't have any connection with Penn. I have no connection with Wharton. None of my children went to school here. I've never lived in Philadelphia. I don't like cheesesteaks. So I was actually wondering myself, why was I asked to make this commencement address? And so I talked to the dean, and he said, well, you weren't our first choice, but you were in the top 20 category. And so as I thought about it, maybe I really didn't deserve to be here, but as I thought more about the executive MBA program in my own life, I actually realized I had made a mid-career change as well. And those who have been here, who are graduating today, have made a very big decision when they decided to enter this program. Because they could have gone along where they were, but they decided they wanted to do something that had real risks. The risks are these. One, they would have to work at their job while they were also going to school. The result is that you might not be able to do your job as well, and you might not be able to do your schoolwork as well. So that's a risk. Trying to do these two masters at once is not easy. Second, there's a risk that when they came here, they wouldn't do very well, and they might drop out or do poorly academically, and then everybody would know they didn't actually meet the requirements here, and people might look at them less favorably. And then there's the risk that your family may not be that attentive to what you're doing, and they might not like it. You might say, all of you have impaired your family relationships potentially by doing this job, work, and school, and your family at the same time. Now, that concern probably wasn't so real because it turns out that 16 babies have resulted from the members of this class so during the time they were here. So maybe the family relationships did work out okay. Now, and the other problem that they also had, and the risk is that once you get this degree, you say, okay, now I maybe don't want to go back to the employer that might have helped pay for this, and maybe I want to do something different. How do I tell my employer? How do I tell my family and friends I'm going to do something different? And am I really qualified to do something different than what I've been doing while I was in the mid-career program? So it's a bit of a risk, and I've taken these kind of risks myself, and maybe I was asked because I'm an illustration of the value of actually trying to change your career. Now, I was trained as a lawyer, and I thought the highest calling of mankind was to practice law. I tried it for a few years, and my colleagues and my clients suggested maybe that wasn't the right path for me. They kind of suggested I wasn't very good at it, but I wanted to do something different. John Kennedy famously said when I was very young, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So I was inspired to make a mid-career change after practicing law and get into politics and hopefully help work in the government. I went to work in 1976 for a man running for president of the United States, Birch Bayh, and 2 months after I joined his campaign for president, he dropped out. So some of you mid-career people may have this experience as well. I was unemployed. So I made a change from the law to politics, and there very quickly I was unemployed. But then I got an offer to work for another person running for president. His name was Jimmy Carter. And I said, isn't that the peanut farmer from Georgia? He has no chance of being president. But I had no job, so I took that job. And another mid-career change, and I went to Georgia, and they couldn't understand my accent, but after a while, Carter managed to win. However, when I joined Carter, he was 33 points ahead of Gerald Ford, and when I finished, he won by 1 point. But as we have observed, White House staffs are filled on people who work in the campaign, so I became the Deputy Domestic Policy Advisor to the President of the United States at 27, a job I really wasn't qualified for, as became apparent as I managed to get inflation to 19% and interest rates to 15%, a record nobody has matched since. But I thought, okay, I'll work in a second term of President Carter, and I said we couldn't possibly lose to Ronald Reagan because he's such an old man. How could anybody get out of bed at that age? He was 69 years old. I was 31. I'm now 69. Doesn't feel so bad now, but we lost. And so some of you may have this experience as well. I hope not, but once again, my mid-career decision didn't really work out because I was unemployed after we lost the election. So I had to go back and make another mid-career change, and I went back to practice law. But once again, my client said, well, you're really not that good a lawyer. And my partner said, why don't you try something else? So I took a risk at the age of 37. And I did it at 37 because I read that an entrepreneur will start his or her first company between the ages of 28 and 37. And after 37, the chances of doing it goes down. And I read that when I was 37. So I said, okay, I'm going to start a company. I started a small private equity firm in Washington, D.C. Now, I had no MBA. I had no money. I had no knowledge of what private equity was. I just thought it would be better than practicing law, and then my partners didn't want me to practice law. So I started it, and I took a risk. Fortunately, I hired people who had MBAs, and the best of whom had an executive MBA. And in fact, the person who had the executive MBA became our star investor and the person who was responsible for our track record over these years. And so it worked out. Making a mid-career change did for me because I took a risk. Though I should point out that when I was doing this, my mother said, well, David, you know nothing about business. Keep your law license in place in case you need it. And so even to this day, I'm still a member of the D.C. Bar, just in case I need to fall back on it and to please my mother. But I made another mid-career change not long ago, and in two things. One, after Carlyle, my firm became successful, I decided to devote the rest of my life really in large measure to giving away my money and trying to give back to society. So I made a mid-career change to philanthropy. But most recently, I've made another mid-career change, and I'm just trying this out. I've got a TV show. Some of you may have seen it. It's called the immodestly named David Rubenstein Show. I didn't want to name that, but I said, a long Jewish ethnic name, is that really going to work on a TV show? And Mike Bloomberg said it's okay. So let's pretend for a moment that you all have a TV show, And you may want to have that kind of thing at some point in your career. So let's pretend you have a TV show and you're going to interview me. What would be the questions you should ask me? Well, let me go through what questions I think you should ask me. Number one, do I regret not having an MBA? Absolutely. If I had an MBA, I wouldn't have wasted time practicing law, and I would have not made some of the mistakes I made. Mark Zuckerberg wanted me to invest in his company when he was an undergraduate at Harvard. I thought it would get nowhere, so I said no. Jeff Bezos wanted to give us a third of his company when he was starting out, and I said no, that will go nowhere. So I've had an MBA, maybe I would have been better, but maybe if I'd had an executive MBA, I would have been even better. And the reason is this. An executive MBA is somebody, a person who has an executive MBA knows how to really use their time well and manage their time, because you're serving many different masters, as all of you know. And I think the discipline of being an executive MBA is actually better than the discipline of just being a regular MBA. So I congratulate all of you who've gone through this difficult trial of having many different masters you have to serve. But the answer to the question is I wish I had an MBA, and in fact, all of my children have or will have MBAs and no law degrees. In fact, my one-year-old granddaughter is now studying for the boards to take the MBA test as well. There's a test you can take when you're, a study group that you can study with when you're only 1 year old for your MBA, and no MedCats, no LSATs for her. Another question you might ask me is, do you really need an MBA to do well in business? Well, I got lucky, but I had partners around me who had MBAs, and particularly an executive MBA, and you don't really need an MBA. To be honest, if you are Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, you probably can get along without an MBA. In fact, they didn't even have college degrees in 3 of those cases, and Jeff Bezos doesn't have any MBA. But the chances of that happening are relatively small. So I would say you're much better off to have an MBA, and you're much more likely to succeed in business with an MBA, and I think an executive MBA is actually more valuable. What do I look for when I'm hiring MBAs? I've hired hundreds and hundreds of MBAs, interviewed them over the years. What am I looking for? I'm looking for somebody that actually knows what they want to do with their life, knows how to actually talk about what they want to do, has certain skills, seems to be highly motivated, wants to be in business for the right reasons, not just to make money, but to do something useful with the money. So those are the skills I'm looking for. And I've hired many MBAs, but tend to prefer executive MBAs because they tend to be more mature. They tend to actually have more life experiences that are more valuable. So I congratulate all of you, and any of you who are looking for a job still, well, you can call me at the right time. What qualities do I think somebody should have to be successful in the professional life? Well, let me go through what I think are the most important ones. I don't think you need to be a genius. I think reasonable intelligence is okay. Geniuses are too complicated, and I try not to hire geniuses because they're hard to manage. Reasonable intelligence, the willingness to work hard. Great things are not accomplished 9 to 5, 5 days a week. You have to really put in the time to do this. Secondly, persistence. You have to be able to say, overcome when people tell you no. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all were told no. So you need persistence as well. You need the willingness to share credit. Nobody can do anything in business by him or herself. You also need, in my view, the ability to focus on something, that make it your own, master something, not just don't become too spread out. You also need, in my view, the ability to share the credit in many ways that I didn't mention before. You need to really tell other people that you appreciate what they're doing. You express the word gratitude repeatedly to people. You also need, in my view, to learn how to communicate. What I mean by that is this: all of life is really about persuading people to do what you want them to do. So you persuade them by learning how to talk orally, by learning how to write well, and by learning how to lead by example. When George Washington was in Valley Forge, not too far from here, during the Revolutionary War, he could have gone to the Ritz-Carlton and stayed, but he stayed with his troops. He led by example. So learn how to communicate in a way that will make you a leader, in my view. Learn how to read repeatedly. 30% of college graduates never read another book after they graduate from college. 30% of college graduates never read another book. Read, and continuously read books much more than anything else. In my view, it's very important. Learn also about the importance of ethics. You're going to take your whole life and build your reputation, and you can destroy it in 5 minutes. You will be tempted to cut corners many times. do not do so. Think about all the people who have tried to cut corners and what happened to them when they were caught. And you should always remember that your reputation is something you can never get back. So always be certain to comply with ethics. Also, remember to give back to society. My view is the people that give back to society are the people that enjoy life the most. And let me talk about that for one moment. MBA doesn't mean money beats anything. An MBA doesn't mean money beats anything. An MBA is a license to do many things in our society, but it really enables you, if you want, to make money. You don't have to. You can do many things in the nonprofit area with an MBA and do quite well. But if you choose to make money, the purpose of money is not just to buy more homes, artwork, boats, planes, and so forth. It's to enable you to do something useful for society. So I hope all of you will feel that with your MBA, you have a license not just to make more money than you did before, but you have a license to do something good for society. Now, in my view, the people that give back to society have an advantage. They will live longer, because happy people live longer. And you might laugh at this, but when people give to a food kitchen, people work in a food kitchen, people give scholarship money, they don't say, I hate myself for having helped these poor people. I hate myself for helping these scholarship kids. They're happy about it, and happy people live longer. David Rockefeller made it to 102. So even selfishly, if you don't really want to give back to society, you'll live longer. And then there's also a special place in heaven for those who do give back to society. Now you may laugh at that, but why would you want to take a chance that I'm wrong? What you should try to think about is not make the mistake that I did. I started getting involved in philanthropy when I was in my 50s. I should have done it earlier, made it earlier part of my DNA, and you should do that. Find something that enables you to give back to your country, your society, something that can be a project on the side, but something that will give you a sense of fulfillment. And I believe if you do that, you'll enjoy your life much more than you would otherwise if you just accumulate money. The people that have just accumulated money, in my view, are tortured souls, and they really don't know what to do with the money if they don't really have something on the outside that they really feel they've done something useful with. And think about this. In 1888, a man sat down to breakfast at his breakfast table in Stockholm, and he read his obituary. His name was Alfred Nobel, and he read that he had died. Obviously he hadn't. The newspapers had made a mistake. It was his younger brother who had died. But he read, nonetheless, his obituary, and it said, Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, merchant of death, is gone. Thank God he's gone. And he realized this is what people thought of him. And he said, I've got to do something more important with my life. So he worked out the program ultimately for the Nobel Prizes, which ultimately became his real legacy. So all of you, while you're not thinking about your obituary, what would you want people to say about you as you get to the latter part of your life? Would they want to say, merchant of death, great businessman, but didn't really do anything with his or her money, or that he did or she did something useful for society? So I'd like you to think about that and make that part of your DNA as you go forward. Now, another question that I would like to think that you might ask me is, how do I like interviewing? I enjoy it because you get a chance to tell people and listen to people that tell their life stories. Who are the most valuable people you've interviewed? They are Wharton graduates, of course. Or people that wanted to go to Wharton. One of them was Warren Buffett, who went to Wharton for a few years, but then he decided he liked football better in Nebraska. He moved back. Mike Milken, one of the great philanthropists of our generation. And then I interviewed another person who was a Wharton graduate a few years back, and that was one of the most interesting interviews I had. His name was Donald Trump. And I'm the president of the Economic Club of Washington. I invited him to come down. In the green room, he said, David, ask me anything you want, but ask me if I'm going to run for president. I said, president of what? He said, president of the United States. I said, Donald, you have no chance of being president of the United States. I know Washington, you're not going to make that. What's the other question you want me to ask? Ask me if my hair is real. You can feel my hair, and you can see it's real. Some people think it's not. It was a great interview, and the only question I stumped him on was, do you ever have any self-doubt about anything? And he just said no, didn't have any self-doubt, and ultimately he was right and I was wrong. He became president of the United States. So you never know, what will happen with people you interview. I'd like you to also think about this. One other person that I wanted to interview but haven't interviewed until recently was a man named Joseph Wharton. Recently I had a chance to interview him, and he asked me to convey this message to the graduating class. Mr. Wharton, any words of advice for the graduating class of Wharton Executive MBAs? Yes. First, congratulations. Second, I wish that there had been an executive MBA program when I was trying to advance my career. I tried many different things, changed my focus mid-career a few times, but always wished I had a more formal education. I would certainly have enrolled in an executive MBA program if one existed at the time. Third, you will wear my name on your resume for the rest of your life. I am proud that you chose Wharton for your executive MBA. Make me proud with what you do with the MBA. I will always be watching. And what he said is something I'd like you to think about as I conclude. For the rest of your life, people will say to you three things, or ask you three questions. One, where are you from? Two, what's your name? And three, where do you go to school? And for the rest of your life, you're going to say Wharton. And you should say, I went to school at Wharton and I got an executive MBA and I'm very proud of it. But people will judge you with very high standard. You will have high expectations of what you can achieve, and you should try to live up to that. And you should try to not only live up to the expectations people have, your family and everyone else, but you should try to do something useful for society, to give back to society, and to make a difference in society. We're only on this earth for a short period of time. And the accumulation of money isn't the only purpose of life. The accumulation of money is interesting, but what you really should want to do is make a mark for yourself and make your partner, your spouse, your children, your parents proud that you've done something with your life more than just make money. You might have built a company, but even if you built a great company, you should do something to give back to society, and do so because not only will you live a longer life, but you will have a special place in heaven, and I hope everybody on this stage will get to be in that special place in heaven not too long from now, maybe 100 years from now. Thank you very much.